After being left alone for over 20 years, an old quarry is finally opening again to get more stone. A team led by Eamon is cleaning up the mess. But as they start working, they find something surprising. A secret that will change everything. Eamon and his crew worked really hard for 2 whole days. They cleaned up lots of junk and big plants that had grown all over the quarry. On the third day, something amazing happened. Their big digging machine hit something solid with a loud, echoing clang. Everyone stopped and looked at the hole. As they peeked closer, they saw something shiny and yellowish sticking out of the dirt. Eamon told his team to grab shovels and small tools to dig it out. At first, they could only see a tiny bit of the shiny metal. But as they dug deeper, they realized this wasn't just any old piece of junk. It was something much bigger and more exciting. The team got really excited. What could it be? They used the big machine to carefully pull the object out of the ground. When it was finally out, everyone stood there, speechless. It was a huge metal thing, at least 5 feet wide and 6 feet deep. The surface was old and rusty, but they could see clear details, including what looked like doors. Eamon grabbed a handle and, to everyone's surprise, it opened. This wasn't just any metal. It was part of something much bigger. Eamon knew they had to find out what it was. Eamon stood at the strange doorway, looking into the dark opening. His curiosity grew stronger. "We're going in," he said firmly, grabbing his flashlight. The crew hesitated, looking at each other nervously. It's not every day you find something like this buried underground, but Eamon's determination pushed them forward. As they entered the tunnel, the air felt heavy and stale. Dust swirled around their feet, and faint cobwebs clung to the walls. The tunnel looked oddly perfect. The walls were cleanly cut with beams supporting the structure. It was clear this wasn't some natural formation. Someone had built this. But why? Some of the crew members started to feel uneasy. "This place gives me the creeps," whispered Kyle, the youngest worker. His voice shook as he backed away. "I'm not staying down here another second." A few others nodded, fear in their eyes. They turned back quickly, their flashlights bobbing as they disappeared into the dark. Eamon watched them leave but didn't stop them. He understood their fear, yet something inside him refused to turn back. "We've come this far," he told the remaining crew. "We need to know what's down here." The group pushed on, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they moved deeper into the tunnel. Strange colored markings appeared on the beams, symbols Eamon couldn't explain. The tunnel seemed to lead them somewhere, as if guiding them. Then the tunnel took a sharp turn, and what they saw next left them frozen in shock. Eamon and his crew crept deeper into the tunnel, their flashlights sweeping over the walls. The space grew tighter, and the beams holding the tunnel together seemed closer than before. What really caught their attention, though, were the strange symbols painted on the beams. Each marking had the same shape, but was a different color: red, blue, yellow. "What do these mean?" whispered Liam, one of the older crew members. No one had an answer, but the markings felt purposeful, almost like they were meant to lead them somewhere. The group moved carefully, trying to stay quiet. Every step echoed, and the further they went, the more eerie the silence felt. Suddenly, the tunnel made a sharp turn, and as they rounded the corner, their flashlights lit up a massive underground chamber. Eamon blinked in disbelief. The space was enormous, far larger than he ever imagined. It looked like a cave, but with clear signs of human activity. Ancient tools, dusty but intact, leaned against the rocky walls. Strange symbols were etched into the stone, spreading across the room like a forgotten message. "What is this place?" Declan asked, his voice filled with awe. Eamon didn't answer. Instead, he brushed dust off a nearby tool and noticed an unfamiliar symbol carved into its surface. It was like nothing he'd seen before. Before anyone could react, a faint sound echoed from the distance. Footsteps. Someone or something was coming. Eamon and his team stood frozen, their flashlights scanning the enormous underground chamber. The air felt thick, and the silence was broken only by the soft shuffling of their boots. Ancient tools covered in dust, but strangely well kept, leaned against the rocky walls. Scribbled symbols carved deep into the stone surrounded them like a forgotten language. "This place, it's like a time capsule," said Ronan, his voice low with wonder. Eamon walked toward a pile of tools, brushing away years of dirt and dust. As the symbol on the tools became clear, his brow furrowed. He had seen something like it before. But where? Before he could think further, an unsettling sound filled the chamber. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing through the silence. The crew froze, exchanging nervous glances. "Who's there?" whispered Finn, gripping his flashlight tightly. The footsteps grew louder, closer. It was clear they weren't alone. Eamon quickly motioned for the team to hide behind a cluster of large boulders. They crouched low, dimming their lights and holding their breath. Moments later, a group of elderly men shuffled into the chamber. They were dressed in worn, old work clothes, their silver hair illuminated by lanterns. The men moved calmly, lighting lanterns and tending to makeshift beds made from mining carts. The crew watched in shock. These men looked like miners, but how could they still be here? One of Eamon's crew let out a quiet gasp, and one of the elderly men turned sharply. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice firm but not unkind. Eamon signaled the team to stay still, but it was too late. The men had heard them, and now they were coming closer. The elderly man holding the lantern stopped a few steps away, his eyes squinting into the shadows where Eamon and his team were hiding. "We mean you no harm," he said, his voice calm and steady. His words were enough to make Eamon pause. Slowly, he signaled his crew to step out of hiding. They rose cautiously, flashlights flickering as they emerged into the light. The old man, who introduced himself as Owen, looked relieved. Behind him, the other miners stood quietly, their faces weathered and their clothes worn, as if time had forgotten them. Eamon and his team exchanged puzzled glances. How were these men still here? "We've been waiting for a long time," Owen said, his voice soft but filled with meaning. Eamon asked how this could be possible, and Owen shook his head, as if remembering a long-forgotten story. "You found the tunnel door," Owen continued, his words carrying a strange weight. "That door leads to the truth we've lived with for decades." Eamon and his team were stunned. "They have been down here this whole time," Cian whispered. Owen nodded. "We never thought anyone would come." The crew stood in silence, trying to process what they were hearing. Owen's calm demeanor didn't seem threatening. He and the other miners looked tired, not dangerous. Eamon took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Tell us what happened," he said, his voice steady. Owen looked at him, lantern light flickering across his face. "I will," he replied, "but it's a story you won't believe." Owen took a deep breath, his voice heavy with emotion as he began the story. Decades ago, he and his team had been working in this very mine when disaster struck. A sudden earthquake caused the tunnels to collapse, sealing them underground. At first, they tried digging their way out, but the ground was unstable, and every attempt risked another collapse. "We waited," Owen said softly, "hoping someone would come for us, but no one did." Eamon and his crew listened in stunned silence as Owen continued. The miners had survived by rationing the stored supplies meant for the mining crew. canned food, rice, and beans. There were enough provisions for hundreds of men, Owen explained, but with only 8 of them, it lasted years. But survival came at a cost. Owen's voice cracked as he admitted the hardest part wasn't the hunger. It was the loneliness, knowing they were forgotten. His words hung in the air, and Eamon felt a chill run through him. Aidan, unable to hold back, whispered, 30 years. That's impossible. Owen nodded sadly. We were left here, buried alive with no way out. The crew exchanged shocked glances. This was more than they ever imagined. A tragedy frozen in time, now finally uncovered. Eamon and his team knew they had to help. With careful planning, they guided Owen and the remaining miners out of the tunnel, step by step, until they reached the surface. For the first time in over 30 years, sunlight touched their faces. Tears streamed down as the miners breathed fresh air again, overwhelmed by freedom. The miners were rushed to the hospital, where they received proper care and rest. News of the discovery spread quickly, and Eamon's team became heroes overnight. The story of the lost miners shocked the nation, and their emotional reunions with surviving family members left everyone speechless. Eamon watched quietly as Owen embraced a tearful loved one, a moment he thought would never come. We were just here to reopen a quarry, Eamon said to himself, shaking his head. Instead, we saved 8 lives. The old mine was sealed forever, but the miners' story would never be forgotten.